"Son, I swear I didn't push your wife." That sentence was my plea, my truth, and the beginning of my ruin. I am a mother who was sent to prison by her own son. Not because I was guilty, not because there was proof, but because it was easier for him to believe his wife than to believe the woman who carried him, fed him, protected him, and loved him for over 35 years. For 2 years, I lived behind bars for a crime I did not commit, and when I finally returned, everything he thought was unbreakable. His marriage, his family, his control collapsed in ways he never imagined. Let me tell you how it began. My name is Margaret Lewis. I was 62 years old when the police put handcuffs on me in front of my own home. That house had been mine for decades. I raised my children there. I mourned my husband there after cancer took him too soon. That porch had known laughter, birthdays, Sunday prayers, and quiet grief. I never imagined it would be the place where my own son would turn me into a criminal. That morning started like so many others. I woke early, made coffee, cooked breakfast, and tried once again to keep peace in a family that was already cracking. My son Daniel and his wife Lauren had been living with me temporarily for 8 months. They said they were saving for a house. I knew the truth. Daniel had lost his job, and Lauren refused to lower her standards. Still, he was my son. A mother does not abandon her child. Lauren and I had never truly gotten along. She smiled in public and sharpened her words in private. That morning, she complained about the eggs, the coffee, the temperature of the house. I apologized, as I always did. After breakfast, Daniel stepped into the garage to take a phone call. Lauren followed me onto the porch. The air was cool and quiet. I remember thinking, foolishly, that maybe this day would pass without conflict. Then she said it. "You need to stop turning my husband against me." I was stunned. "Lauren, I don't—" "Yes, you do," she snapped. "You make him feel guilty, like he owes you his life." I tried to explain. I told her I only wanted peace. I told her I loved my son. She rolled her eyes, stepped backward, and in that moment, this moment is carved into my memory, I saw her glance at the broken step behind her. She leaned back. She fell. Before I could reach her, before I could speak, she screamed. She pushed me. Daniel came running. Neighbors appeared. Lauren cried, clutching her stomach, wailing that she was pregnant, that she had lost the baby. My heart dropped into my chest. I didn't even know she was expecting. "Daniel," I said, my hands shaking. She fell. I didn't touch her. He didn't listen. "What did you do?" he shouted. "I swear to you, I didn't." "Stop lying!" He roared, his face red, his voice filled with a fury I had never seen before. "You've always hated her. You've always wanted control." Lauren sobbed louder. Daniel dropped to his knees beside her, whispering her name, promising her everything would be okay. He didn't look at me when I stumbled backward, my legs weak, my chest tight. I fell onto the porch chair, dizzy, gasping for air. "Daniel," I whispered, reaching for him. Please believe me." "I'm good." He stood up and turned on me like a stranger. "You disgust me," he said. "You're sick, you're jealous, and now you've killed my child." Those words shattered something inside me. I stood, trembling, and grabbed his sleeve. "I'm your mother," I begged. "I raised you. You know me. You know I would never." He ripped his arm away. Then he slapped me. The sound was sharp, cruel, final. My face burned. My ears rang. I tasted blood. "Don't touch me," he snarled. "If anything happens to Lauren or that baby, I swear I will make you pay. I'll make sure you rot for this." I collapsed. Not just to the porch floor, but inside myself. My vision blurred. My heart felt like it was being torn apart by hands I had once held when they were small and warm. The police arrived minutes later. By then, the story was complete. Angry mother, injured pregnant wife, dead unborn child. I was nothing more than a villain in a story my son helped write. I tried to explain. I tried to stand. I tried to speak. Daniel never looked back. At the station, they processed me like I was dangerous. At the trial, Lauren cried perfectly. Daniel testified against me. He told them I was controlling, unstable, resentful. The jury believed him. 2 years. Prison strips you of everything. Your name, your dignity, your sense of time. The nights were the worst, lying on a thin mattress, staring at the ceiling, replaying that slap over and over again. Not the pain of it, but what it meant. I had been condemned not by strangers, but by my own flesh and blood. I cried at first. Then I stopped, because something else took its place. Resolve. I learned to listen, to watch, to wait. I learned that justice is not always fair, but it is patient. And when patience belongs to a mother who has lost everything, it becomes something terrifying. Then one day, a letter arrived. From my daughter, Claire. She believed me. That letter didn't free me. It didn't shorten my sentence. But it gave me something far more powerful. Hope. Because when a mother who has been betrayed by her own son finds hope again, she does not return broken. She returns ready. And the day I walked out of prison, Daniel thought it was over. He was wrong. That was only the beginning. If you felt that in your heart, hit like and comment where you're watching from. You might just find someone nearby feeling the same way. Prison does not begin with bars or locked doors. It begins with disbelief. The first night in county jail, I sat on a narrow bench in a holding cell that smelled of bleach and sweat, my hands still trembling from the cold metal cuffs that had been removed only minutes earlier. My cheek throbbed where Daniel had struck me. I pressed my fingers against it, half expecting to wake up from a nightmare. Mothers are not supposed to end up here. Grandmothers are not supposed to be called monsters on evening news broadcasts. Yet there I was. They took my shoelaces, my watch, my wedding ring. Each item was dropped into a plastic bag like it meant nothing. That ring had been on my finger for 40 years. Daniel had watched his father slide it onto my hand. No one cared. When they led me to my cell, I walked slowly, my knees weak, my back straight out of stubborn pride. I refused to let them see me collapse. The door clanged shut behind me with a sound so final it stole my breath. I was alone with two strangers, both younger, both hardened in ways I wasn't ready to understand. I lay on the bunk and stared at the ceiling, listening to distant shouting, metal doors slamming, laughter that sounded crueler than anger. Somewhere beyond those walls, Daniel was holding Lauren's hand, telling her she was safe now. Somewhere, he was convincing himself that what he'd done was necessary. The next morning, I met my public defender. He was polite, tired, and overwhelmed. He skimmed my file while sipping cold coffee. "The case doesn't look good," he said gently. "Your son's testimony carries weight." The neighbor heard shouting. "The wife was pregnant." "She wasn't," I whispered. He glanced up. "Excuse me?" "She wasn't pregnant anymore," I said, my voice shaking. She had lost the baby before that day. I didn't know it then, but I know it now. There are medical records. "I feel he wanted," he sighed. "Mrs. Lewis, unless we can get those records admitted, the jury will see this as a grieving husband and a violent mother-in-law." Violent. That word wrapped around my heart like barbed wire. The trial moved faster than I expected. Too fast. I barely had time to understand what was happening before I was sitting in a courtroom, my name spoken in a tone usually reserved for criminals. Lauren wore soft colors and clutched tissues like props. Daniel sat beside her, protective, attentive, the perfect husband. When he took the stand, I felt physically ill. He looked straight ahead, not at me, and spoke with practiced pain. He said I was controlling, that I resented his wife, that I had always been jealous of their life together. He said he saw me push her. Every sentence felt like another slap. When it was my turn, I stood on trembling legs and told the truth. I spoke of the broken step, of the argument, of her stepping backward. I spoke of love, of sacrifice, of raising him alone after his father died. I looked at Daniel then, really looked at him, searching for a flicker of recognition. There was none. The verdict came 6 hours later. Guilty. 2 years. I remember the sound my body made when my knees gave out. I remember the way Daniel exhaled, like a man relieved of a burden. Lauren cried quietly, her head on his shoulder. Cameras flashed. Someone whispered, "She deserves it." After Dater. Prison time is not measured in days. It is measured in losses. I lost my privacy first, then my sleep, then my sense of safety. But the deepest loss came when letters from Daniel never arrived. Weeks passed, months, nothing, not a question, not an apology, not even anger. I learned quickly to keep my head down, to eat when food was offered, to speak only when necessary. Other women asked what I'd done. When I told them, they stared at me differently. "Your own son?" one whispered. Yes, I meant it. That word followed me everywhere, like a stain. At night, I replayed the moment on the porch over and over. I heard Daniel's voice, felt his hand, remembered the way his eyes looked through me as if I were already gone. The injustice of it pressed on my chest until breathing hurt. I wrote letters. To him, to Lauren, to the judge. None were answered. Then, 6 months into my sentence, something changed. A letter arrived with handwriting I recognized instantly. "Mom," it said, "I believe you." It was from my daughter, Claire. She wrote carefully, knowing every word would be read. She told me she had requested medical records, that she was asking questions Daniel refused to answer, that things didn't add up. For the first time since the cell door closed, I cried without shame. Claire visited me the next month. When she sat across from me, her eyes were calm but burning with purpose. She squeezed my hands through the cold glass and mouthed, "I'm not done." End quote. The game and with the ruse need. In that moment, I understood something important. I was not powerless. Prison had taken my freedom, but it had given me something else. Time. Time to think. Time to remember who I was before I became a villain in my son's story. Time to understand that injustice does not correct itself, it waits for someone strong enough to expose it. And I was done waiting to break. I began to observe, to listen, to learn. I helped other women write letters. I read law books from the small library. I paid attention when people spoke about money, about lies, about patterns. Because if Daniel thought prison would erase me, he was wrong. It was sharpening me. And somewhere beyond those walls, my daughter was gathering the truth piece by piece. By the time I walked out, I wouldn't be begging anyone to believe me. They would have no choice. The first thing Claire asked me when she came to visit was, "Do you remember the day Lauren said she was pregnant?" I nodded. She told Daniel over dinner. He cried. Claire pursed her lips, eyes scanning mine like she was measuring more than just my memory. "And before that?" she asked. "Had she ever mentioned a doctor? An ultrasound? Anything?" I tried to think. The truth was, no. There had been no doctor visits, no prenatal vitamins, no morning sickness, no signs. Just the announcement, and then, 2 months later, the fall. Claire leaned back in her seat, folding her arms. The glass window between us made the room colder than it was. "She was never pregnant, Mom." I blinked. "What?" She told Daniel she was. But I found her medical records. I had to fake being her sister to get them, but they show no pregnancy, no appointments, no blood work, nothing. And guess what? I leaned forward. She went to a clinic 2 weeks before the fall, for a different reason. "What kind of clinic?" Claire looked directly at me. "A fertility consultation." The doctor wrote in his notes that she had been trying for months but hadn't conceived. No mention of a pregnancy, ever. My heart slammed against my ribs. "She lied," I whispered. "She lied about everything." Claire nodded, her voice tight. "I think she set you up." The words hit like cold steel. My head spun. Somewhere deep inside, I had suspected, but hearing it aloud, it broke something all over again. Claire saw it. "I know, Mom. I'm sorry, but we're not done. I've started looking into their finances too. Daniel took over all your bank accounts after the arrest. He sold your car, signed papers as your power of attorney. Did you know that?" I sat frozen. "He's draining everything," she said, and he moved. "They bought a house 3 months ago, a big one, cash." I pressed my palm against the glass. "He was supposed to use that money to pay the mortgage here. The house. They sold it, Mom. It's gone." A ringing filled my ears. My home. The only place that still felt like mine. Gone. Claire reached her hand toward the glass, mirroring mine. "But listen to me, he left a trail. He was sloppy. I've got a friend in real estate who's helping me track every transaction. If they used your money illegally, we can make them pay. Maybe not just morally, legally." Tears filled my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "You believe me," I said, my voice cracking. "After all this, you believe me." "Always," Claire said. "Even when I didn't say it, I always knew you weren't capable of this. I just needed to see it clearly." I wanted to hug her, but the glass wall remained between us. So instead, I held her gaze and nodded. After she left, I returned to my cell feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Power. Tiny, flickering, but real. The other women noticed the change in me. Rosie, my cellmate, raised an eyebrow when I walked in with steadier steps than usual. "Well," she said, folding her deck of cards, "you either found Jesus or a good lawyer." "Neither," I said, "but I found my daughter." That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was restless, but because for the first time in months, my brain was alive again. I began retracing everything. The morning Lauren fell, her carefully timed scream, the way she cried but never looked injured, her performative tears at trial, Daniel's silence. I remembered something. A conversation. 2 weeks before the incident, I had overheard Lauren arguing with someone on the phone in the backyard. She was pacing, angry. I only caught pieces. "You said this would be quick. He's still in contact. I need this money, and I need it now." I hadn't told anyone. It didn't seem important then. But now, the next day, I wrote a letter to Claire, detailing everything I remembered from that day, including Lauren's strange phone call. I told her to check the house phone records. Daniel had refused to get rid of the landline, said cell phones were unreliable. If anyone could trace that call, it would be Claire. And Rosie, sharp-eyed as ever, began helping me read the system from inside. She told me which guards would overhear conversations, who might be bribed, which inmates had legal connections, or knew people on the outside. At first, I had judged her, but now I listened. "Don't waste your pain," she told me one night. "Use it. That's how women survive in here. That's how we outlast them." And I would. I had to. Because it wasn't just about me anymore. Daniel hadn't just betrayed his mother. He had stolen from me, lied to a court, used my name to fund a life I was never invited to be part of. And Lauren, she had faked a pregnancy, manipulated the justice system, and taken away the last years I could have spent in peace. They thought prison would silence me. They didn't realize it was training me. One day soon, I would walk out of here, not broken, not begging, but ready. And when I did, I wouldn't just reclaim what was mine. I would bring their house of lies crashing down around them. Claire's next letter arrived, folded neatly in the same pale pink envelope she always used when writing cards as a child. I recognized her handwriting instantly, even though it had matured sharper loops, cleaner lines, but still hers. I waited until after evening head count to read it, curled on my bunk beneath the thin wool blanket, blocking out the sound of a shouting match down the hall. "Mom, you were right. I checked the house line records. A call was made from your landline 2 weeks before Lauren's fall. It went to a prepaid cell phone registered in a fake name. My friend at the phone company traced it to a burner number used in 3 other scams across the state. Also Lauren's ex-boyfriend, the one she swore was ancient history, he lives 30 minutes from the house they just bought. I'm going to dig deeper. I've got screenshots. I'm building a timeline. I don't want to get your hopes too high yet, but it's real. Something is unraveling." I exhaled slowly, clutching the letter to my chest. Lauren had staged everything, from the fake pregnancy to the fall to the performance in court. And Daniel, whether out of love, fear, or weakness, had gone along with it, or maybe worse, he had known. That part was still unclear. Claire's next line gave me chills. "P.S. You still legally co-own the Asheville house even though Daniel sold it. That's a violation. If we prove you were deemed incapable of decision-making under false pretenses, the sale could be reversed. The law's on your side." Slowly, but surely. The law. Those 3 words had felt like an enemy for so long. But now, just maybe, it could be a sword. I showed the letter to Rosie that night. "You've got an ally," she said. "That's more than most get." "She's more than an ally," I said. "She's my daughter." Rosie smiled, then tossed a peanut shell into the waste bin. "Then hold on to her, 'cause when this is over, you're gonna need someone who remembers the real you." That same week, something else shifted. A new inmate arrived young, with a sharp jawline and a heavy attitude. Her name was Kim. She kept to herself, mostly, but something about her felt familiar. On day 3, she walked past my bunk and stopped. "You're Daniel Lewis's mom, right?" I froze. "Why?" She pulled a folded sheet from her waistband. Because this article says your daughter's investigating fraud involving his wife. My sister dated the guy Lauren was seeing behind Daniel's back. I know things. She handed me the article, a printout from a gossip blog. It wasn't official, but it mentioned Daniel and Lauren's suspicious cash purchase of a new home and questioned whether the funds came from Margaret Lewis's estate. She's cheating? I asked, heart racing. Kim shrugged. Used to come into my sister's bar, late nights. Same guy. I thought he was her cousin at first. They weren't acting like cousins. My blood went cold. Claire's theory wasn't just plausible, it was true. Lauren had been living a double life, and Daniel, God help me, I didn't know if he was blinded or complicit. Maybe both. I asked Rosie, what would you do if you had proof someone lied under oath, if you could prove perjury? She didn't even blink. I'd make it public. Then I'd make it legal. Claire and I wrote back and forth weekly now. Each envelope brought more evidence, bank transfers with my forged signature, notary stamps from a man who'd since been fired for fraud, even a private investigator's photo of Lauren meeting the other man at a gas station outside Raleigh. I could see the case building, brick by brick, but my body, it wasn't keeping up. After nearly a year inside, my health was starting to wear down. My left hip ached constantly. I had lost weight. My hands, once steady, had begun to tremble in the mornings. I hid it well. Pride is stronger than pain, but Rosie noticed. You need to get out soon, she said one night. I will, I whispered. But not before they're exposed. I filed my first internal complaint through the prison legal aid office. It was a formal request to reopen my case based on new evidence. Claire sent notarized affidavits from people who'd overheard Lauren bragging about her manipulation. Kim provided a statement about her sister's encounter with Lauren's lover. I had a file now, a folder of truth. When the prison chaplain asked me why I'd started walking straighter, speaking louder, I told him the truth. Because someone believes me. 2 weeks later, a state review board accepted the request. A case manager arrived at my cell. You'll be transferred for a rehearing in 6 weeks. The judge wants to see everything. I sank onto my bunk, tears pooling in my eyes. Claire had done it. I was getting my chance. But this wasn't about freedom anymore. It was about exposing them, Daniel and Lauren, for what they were, for what they had taken, for what they tried to bury. I stared at the letter one last time that night, Claire's words echoing in my mind. I'm building a timeline. She was building something far more powerful than a defense. She was building my return. The day I was transferred for the rehearing felt like waking up from a 2-year coma. I stood in the prison hallway in a different uniform, still issued, still stiff, but this time a shade of blue instead of the usual orange. My wrists were cuffed, but this time I didn't lower my head. I walked with quiet dignity as 2 transport officers escorted me to the waiting van. Rosie gave me a firm nod through the bars as I passed her cell. Burn 'em down, she whispered. It was raining in Asheville when we arrived. Of course it was. That city had a way of weeping when I needed it most. I kept my face to the window as the van passed old familiar streets, my church, the park where I used to push Daniel on the swings, the bakery where I bought Claire's birthday cake every year until she moved west. And then, we passed it. My house. Only it wasn't mine anymore. The shutters had been painted gray. The wind chimes I had hung on the porch were gone, and someone, Lauren, no doubt had planted bright white roses in my mother's old herb garden. White, like innocence. Like some mockery of what they'd taken. I turned away from the window, my chest tight. At the courthouse, Claire was waiting. She wore a navy suit, her hair tied back. Her eyes welled up the second she saw me. She reached for my hands as soon as the guard removed the cuffs. You look tired, she whispered. I'm fine. You don't have to be strong with me, Mom. I know, but I want to be. She took a deep breath. We're ready. The evidence is solid. We've got the medical records, the bank statements, the forged signatures, and that witness from the bar. Our lawyer says the judge we're seeing is known for not tolerating fraud. I nodded slowly. Is Daniel coming? Claire hesitated. He's been subpoenaed, but no one's heard from him directly. He's been quiet. I couldn't tell if that gave me hope or dread. The courtroom was smaller than the one from my original trial. No gallery, just the judge, the attorneys, and a clerk. It felt more like a mediation than justice, but this time the energy was different. My lawyer laid out the timeline. He showed the financial records that proved Daniel had sold my house illegally while I was incarcerated. He demonstrated how Lauren had obtained notary signatures through fraudulent means. Then, the medical expert confirmed, Lauren had never been pregnant. In fact, she had been under fertility evaluation during the time she claimed to be carrying a child. I sat silently, eyes fixed on the judge. He was a man in his 60s, gray eyebrows thick and thoughtful. He barely blinked through the entire presentation. Then came the final blow. Claire called Kim's sister to testify via video. She recounted her encounters with Lauren and the man she referred to as Rick, someone she had seen Lauren kiss in the parking lot of her bar 3 separate times during the months leading to the fall. The timing lined up with the supposed pregnancy and the beginning of the lawsuit. She wasn't acting like someone devoted to her husband, the woman said, more like someone playing 2 sides. When it was time for me to speak, I stood up slowly. I didn't read from a script. I didn't plead. I told the truth. I am a mother, I began, and I spent 2 years in prison for something I didn't do. I was betrayed, not by strangers, but by the son I raised. I don't stand here asking for pity. I stand here asking for my name back. The judge looked at me for a long time. Then he spoke. The evidence presented is compelling. The court finds that Margaret Lewis was convicted under materially false pretenses. A formal motion to vacate the original conviction will proceed. This court will also refer this matter to the district attorney for investigation of potential fraud and perjury by Lauren Lewis and Daniel Lewis. I closed my eyes, not in relief. In mourning for what it took to get here, Claire hugged me the second we stepped outside the courthouse. Her hands trembled against my back. "It's not over yet," she whispered. "I know," I said, "but it's beginning again, on my terms." We spent the night at a small hotel outside town. The first bed with a real mattress I'd felt in years. Claire ordered takeout, my favorite, lemon chicken, rice pilaf, and grilled zucchini. I barely ate. My stomach was too twisted. That night, I sat on the balcony alone, watching the headlights blur through the rain. Daniel hadn't shown up. He hadn't fought back, hadn't defended himself, and in a way, that hurt more than anything. The next morning, we went to the bank. I reclaimed access to my accounts. Most were drained, but a few old certificates of deposit remained untouched, enough to survive, enough to plan. Claire drove me to a lawyer's office specializing in elder financial abuse. We began drafting a civil case against Daniel and Lauren, not for revenge, for accountability. "They took 2 years of your life," Claire said. "They don't get to walk away with your legacy, too." As we drove back to the hotel, she hesitated before speaking again. "Mom, there's something else. Lauren disappeared 2 nights ago. Daniel's not answering anyone's calls. Their house has a for sale sign on the lawn." I didn't respond. I just stared at the road ahead. They were running. Of course they were, because that's what liars do when the light finally finds them. But they could run as far as they wanted. The truth had caught up, and so had I. The news of my exoneration made its quiet rounds through the community like a ripple in still water. No headlines, no apologies, just paperwork, cold, clean, and final. A legal correction that came 2 years too late. But I didn't want noise. I wanted clarity. I wanted to walk down the street and not feel like I had to lower my eyes. I wanted to step into a grocery store without hearing the whispers that once followed me like shadows. The morning after the court ruling, Claire and I returned to the neighborhood I used to call home. Not to reclaim it, but to face it. The house was different in ways only someone who had loved it could notice. The porch swing was gone. The mailbox had a dent in it. The wind no longer carried the smell of lavender from the bushes I'd planted with Daniel when he was 10. And there it was, planted crooked on the front lawn. A white for sale sign, half tilted, like the owners couldn't be bothered to set it straight. Claire pulled over and turned off the engine. "Do you want to go inside?" she asked. "No," I said. "I'm not going in there unless I'm holding a court order or a can of gasoline." She chuckled under her breath, but there was sorrow in it. "They're gone," she said. "Neighbors say a moving truck showed up late 2 nights ago, left before sunrise. Daniel hasn't responded to his subpoena for the civil suit." "Cowards," I muttered. "Both of them." But even as I said it, a deeper ache settled in. Daniel's absence wasn't just cowardice, it was confirmation. He had chosen Lauren to the bitter end. Even when the walls fell in, he ran with her instead of facing what he'd done to me. Claire reached over and squeezed my hand. "They'll be found. We've got private investigators tracking their accounts. They'll slip up." I nodded, but my mind had already drifted elsewhere. That house had once been my sanctuary. I'd brought Daniel home from the hospital to that living room. I'd danced with my late husband in the kitchen while pasta boiled on the stove. I had built a life there. And now? It was just drywall and betrayal. We drove back to Claire's home that afternoon. A modest 2-bedroom in Hendersonville with a wraparound porch and a vegetable garden Claire was proud of. She insisted I stay as long as I needed, but I knew I couldn't be a guest forever. "Have you thought about what comes next?" she asked me over dinner. "I have," I said. "But it's more about what needs to come next." I had made up my mind. "I'm going to speak out," I told her. "Publicly. Maybe not through some loud press conference, but in my own way. I want people to know how this happens. To women like me. To mothers." Claire put down her fork, eyes narrowing with cautious approval. "A memoir?" she asked. "Or a podcast?" "Maybe both," I said. "Something honest, something unpolished. I want to tell the truth before anyone else tries to rewrite it." She nodded slowly. "I'll help." Over the next few weeks, we set to work. I got my first cell phone in over 2 years. I relearned how to navigate email. Claire helped me set up a voice recorder. We created a timeline on a whiteboard in her office with sticky notes, photos, receipts, everything. But between the research and the writing, I was still processing. Healing wasn't linear. There were nights I cried in the guest room because I missed Daniel's laugh. Not the man he became, but the boy he once was. The boy who used to kiss my cheek after baseball games. Who once held my hand at his father's funeral and said, "It's just us now, Mom." Onfrest. That boy was gone. One night, I listened to a voicemail Claire had saved on her phone, Daniel's voice, from months ago. "Claire, tell Mom to stop digging. She'll ruin what little she has left. None of this will change anything. She did what she did. Let it die." His voice wasn't angry. It was cold, like he had erased me from memory. I deleted the message after hearing it. I couldn't carry both the truth and the grief. Claire's friend at a local news station offered me a private interview, off camera, just audio. She said older audiences were responding to stories about injustice and elder abuse. She thought mine might resonate. I hesitated. Then I said yes. We recorded the segment in a quiet studio in Asheville. I spoke plainly. I told everything, from the fall to the slap to the trial. I cried once when I mentioned Daniel's hand striking my face, but I didn't let it stop me. The segment aired 2 days later on a Sunday morning broadcast, and the emails poured in. From women who had been falsely accused, from grandmothers cut off from their families, from daughters who believed their mothers too late. "I thought I was alone," one woman wrote. "Your story gave me back my voice." Claire printed every message and kept them in a binder she labeled Mom's Army. "You're not just surviving," she told me. "You're starting a movement." But not everyone was silent. That night, an anonymous email arrived. No subject line, no name, just 5 words. "You don't know the half." And attached? A blurry photograph. Lauren, with a baby. I stared at the photo on the screen, my breath caught between rage and disbelief. Lauren, holding a baby. Not just holding, cradling. Her face close to the infant's, her smile soft, maternal. The kind of photo that belongs in birth announcements or silver picture frames. The image was grainy, likely taken from a distance, but it was unmistakably her. Claire looked over my shoulder. "Do you recognize where that is?" I shook my head slowly. "No, but that's her." She took the laptop gently from me and enlarged the image. There's a sign in the background, partially visible. Looks like Street Agnes Family Health Center. I blinked. "That's a women's shelter in Knoxville." "I've heard of it," Claire said. "Some of their services include prenatal care, early childhood assistance. Maybe she's hiding there." "Why would she go to a shelter?" I asked, confused. "She had money. My money." Claire leaned forward. "Because she's running. And maybe Daniel isn't with her anymore." That thought stunned me. I hadn't considered the possibility that they'd split. I'd assumed, as any betrayed mother would, that my son had fled with his wife out of blind loyalty. But now? What if the baby is hers? I asked. Claire nodded. Then the timeline doesn't make sense. She wasn't pregnant during the trial. We proved that. She didn't give birth during your prison time. Unless she had the baby afterward, which means she is pregnant now, or was, recently. I stood abruptly, my pulse racing. She used the same lie twice. It made sense in a sickening way. Lauren had already gotten away with faking a pregnancy once. Why wouldn't she do it again, except this time follow through? A real baby, a new identity, a new layer of protection. Claire opened a private browser tab and started researching the shelter. They don't release information, she muttered. Confidential, for the safety of the women. Makes sense. But if we get a court order, we might be able to confirm if she's staying there. We need to move fast, I said. If she finds out we know, she'll vanish again. It's not forwarded, but deep down, I felt something colder, something I hadn't let myself feel in months. Doubt. Because if Lauren had truly had a child, whose child was it? Claire read my face. You think it could be Daniel's? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The possibility slithered into my thoughts like smoke under a locked door. If it was Daniel's baby, that meant two things. He was still with her, or worse, he had forgiven her, maybe even planned this with her. Claire closed the laptop. Let's breathe. No assumptions. We focus on what we know. What we know, I snapped, is that she has a baby. She's hiding, and no one is holding her accountable. Claire placed a calming hand on mine. Then we hold her accountable. The next day, we contacted our lawyer. With the civil suit pending, we requested an emergency motion to include the photo as evidence of a potential ongoing deception. The judge agreed to consider it, but we'd need to prove the photo's origin first. Claire made phone calls. She reached out to a local PI she trusted, Retta Collins, a retired policewoman with a reputation for discretion and tenacity. I've tracked politicians, missing teens, and more cheating husbands than I can count, Retta said when we met her. But something about this one feels personal. It is, I said. She took my life. Retta looked me square in the eye. Then let's go get it back. It's cupboard. Within a week, Retta traced the image metadata back to a burner email account created at a public library in rural Tennessee. Someone wanted me to see that photo, but not to extort. To warn me, whoever sent this, Retta said, knows her, or is watching her. We published a revised version of my interview and update. I didn't name the shelter, but I did say this. Some abusers don't look like abusers. They cry in court. They wear clean clothes and smile at cameras. But the damage they do to the truth, to families, to justice runs deep. And sometimes, when the world stops looking, they keep running. The next day, the inbox flooded again. But this time, one message stood out. It was from a woman named Leah, who worked part-time at a women's health nonprofit. She wrote, I don't want to be involved, but I think I've seen her. She's using the name Julia. The baby's name is Ava. She's not alone. There's a man. Doesn't talk much. Limp in his left leg. Maybe ex-military? Daniel. He injured his knee in college. Surgery never fully healed it. Claire read the message and looked up at me. He's with her, she whispered. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood still. So Daniel had chosen her again. Even after everything. Even after the lies, the fraud, the ruin they had run. Together, under new names, raising a child born of either manipulation or something darker. Retta called later that evening. I've got a plan, she said. It's risky, but if you want closure, we might have to confront them. Not in court, not on paper, in person. I swallowed. Where? There's a community health fair in 2 weeks. Street Agnes is hosting. Families, staff, everyone will be there. I can get you in. But once you're in, there's no script. No script, I echoed. Just truth. And consequences. The day of the health fair came wrapped in a thin layer of gray cloud, the kind that threatened rain but never delivered it. Claire drove us in silence, both of us dressed inconspicuously, jeans, jackets, nothing to draw attention. Retta had arranged for badges that labeled us as volunteers for an affiliated charity. They looked legitimate enough. We passed through check-in with ease. Street Agnes Community Park buzzed with activity. Children darted between booths, offering balloon animals and face paint. A small band played near the central fountain. Local clinics handed out pamphlets on diabetes prevention, prenatal care, and child safety. The scent of popcorn and grilled sausage hung in the air. It could have been any festival in any town. Except I wasn't here to enjoy it. I was hunting for the woman who destroyed my life and the son who let her do it. Retta stood near the northwest entrance, dressed like a vendor in a booth labeled Neighborhood Safety. She gave a discreet nod when she spotted us. "They're here," she said through Claire's earpiece. "Booth 14, near the vaccination tent. Woman's got long dark hair, black cardigan, holding the baby." My throat tightened. Claire placed a steadying hand on my arm. "We don't confront until we're sure. No drama. We watch. We confirm." I nodded, but my heart beat like a drum against my ribs. We moved slowly toward the booth, and then I saw them. Lauren stood beside a folding table, rocking a baby girl in a sling against her chest. She looked thinner, her hair darker, but it was her. She wore a name tag, Julia Green, community advocate, and there he was, Daniel, standing just behind her, arms crossed, body stiff. His beard was thicker than I remembered, his hair a bit longer, but he still had that same uneven stance, his left knee slightly bent inward. He looked older, tired, but alive, and by her side. I stopped in my tracks. Claire's voice was low. "Are you okay?" "No," I whispered, "but I'm here. I'm createds too." Retta circled in closer, snapping discreet photos from her booth. "We need clear shots of both of them. The baby too, if possible. This confirms identity. A judge can use it." I watched as Lauren smiled at a passing mother, handed her a flyer, then adjusted the blanket around the baby. Daniel kept scanning the crowd, his eyes rarely staying in one place. And then he saw me. For a second, he froze. Our eyes locked. His mouth opened slightly, whether to speak, to shout, or to deny. I'll never know. But then Lauren turned to follow his gaze. She saw me too. Her expression didn't shift. Not at first. But the color drained from her cheeks like someone had pulled a plug beneath her skin. She turned back to Daniel, said something sharply. He grabbed her arm. They moved. Not rushed, not frantic, but purposeful. Toward the back. "Retta, they're running," Claire said. "I see them," Retta replied. "Follow but don't confront unless you're ready for a scene." They're headed toward the service gate. Claire and I broke into a fast walk, weaving past strollers and food trucks. We turned a corner behind a medical supply booth and found them in a narrow pathway between tents. "Daniel!" I shouted, the name ripping from my throat. He stopped. Lauren hissed something at him, tugging his arm, but he turned. He looked at me, and for the first time in 2 years he saw me. Not the accused. Not the inmate. Not the burden. His mother. "What are you doing here?" he asked, voice low, hoarse. "You know exactly why I'm here," I said. "You stole from me, lied, let her put me in prison, and now you're playing house with a child and a fake name?" Lauren stepped in front of him. "You need to leave, Margaret. This isn't your business." "Oh, it became my business the day you murdered my name." Claire stepped forward. "We have evidence. You think a new name erases what you did? You're being sued. You're being investigated. Running won't stop it." Lauren's face hardened. "I don't care what you think you have. No jury will believe a bitter ex-con trying to ruin her son's family." I laughed a sharp, bitter sound. "I'm not trying to ruin his family," I said. "You already did that." Daniel looked at the baby, his jaw clenched. "She's mine," he said quietly. I blinked. "Is she?" He hesitated. "Too long." Lauren stepped in again. "We don't owe you anything." "No," I said. "But you owe her." I pointed to the child. "The truth. And you'll owe a lot more when the judge sees this." Retta appeared behind us, camera raised. Lauren palled. Daniel turned away. "I loved you," I said, my voice breaking. "I gave you everything, and you let her destroy it. For what? A lie wrapped in a cradle?" "Stop it," Lauren snapped. "You're pathetic." Daniel didn't defend me. Didn't defend her, either. He just stared. At nothing. Then turned and walked away. Lauren followed, and I let them go. For now. Because the real confrontation would come in courtrooms and affidavits and headlines. This was just the reveal. Claire touched my shoulder. "That was brave." "No," I said. "That was necessary." I watched them disappear into the crowd, the baby's blanket fluttering like a white flag in the wind. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The morning after the confrontation, I sat on Claire's porch with a steaming cup of coffee in my hands, staring out at the quiet street. Her neighborhood was filled with families who watered their lawns at 7 a.m. and waved at each other while walking their dogs. The kind of place where people still brought casseroles when someone was grieving. But I wasn't grieving anymore. I was building. Claire stepped out, wrapped in a thick robe, her hair still damp from the shower. "You didn't sleep," she said gently. "No," I replied. "Didn't want to." She sat beside me. "I saved all the photos from yesterday. Retta already submitted them to the attorney. They're gold. Everything from the name tags to the baby to the confrontation is time-stamped, location verified. We have our proof." I nodded, though my mind had drifted beyond the legal battle. I kept replaying Daniel's face, empty, uncertain, torn. That pause when I asked if the baby was his. He didn't lie, but he didn't confirm either. "Do you believe her?" I asked Claire suddenly. She looked at me. "Lauren? Never. About anything. I mean about the baby. Do you believe that's Daniel's child?" Claire hesitated. "I don't know. It's possible. But the timeline is tight. Too tight." The math didn't lie. Lauren had claimed to be pregnant during my trial but had been proven not to be. If this baby, Ava, was born after I was released, then she'd be barely a few months old. But in that photo at the fair, the child looked older, 6 months, maybe more. Something didn't add up. "I want a DNA test," I said flatly. Claire's brows lifted. "That's a steep request." "I don't care. If Daniel's being manipulated with a child that isn't his, it matters. Not just for the case, but for him, for that baby." Claire nodded. "I'll talk to the lawyer. We may be able to file for a court-ordered paternity test, especially if Daniel's identity is being used under false pretense. It's Climses Enders that head doing Recbide." Later that afternoon, we met with our attorney, Mr. Stokes, a meticulous man in his 70s who'd spent a lifetime chasing justice for people forgotten by the system. "I've seen a lot in my day," he said, flipping through the new evidence. "But this is exceptional. Fraud, defamation, elder abuse, false imprisonment, and now identity fraud on top of it. We can push for civil damages, and if this baby is being used in deception, that elevates everything." I nodded. "What happens if we prove she lied about the baby?" I asked. He adjusted his glasses. "Then she's not just a manipulator. She's a con artist, and your son, depending on his knowledge or involvement, could be considered an accessory." I felt the sting of that possibility. Daniel wasn't a victim anymore. He was a variable. Claire and Mr. Stokes began filing motions. One to subpoena Lauren under her legal name, one for a DNA test, one to freeze any assets she and Daniel had acquired using my stolen funds. As the legal gears turned, I focused on the one thing I still controlled: my voice. We launched a podcast. Simple, raw, just me and a mic. Claire called it The Mother Sentence. The first episode aired 3 days later. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I told the story from the beginning. My voice cracked at times. I paused often. But I didn't hold back. I named names. I exposed documents. I described the slap, the betrayal, the prison nights. Within 48 hours, we had over 50,000 downloads. By the end of the week, we were invited to speak on a regional radio show. Women called in with their own stories being cut out of wills, being accused of crimes by their children, being silenced. I wasn't just telling my story anymore. I was telling ours. And then another anonymous email arrived. No name. No subject. Just one sentence. The baby's not his, but he doesn't know. Claire read it twice. "Someone's watching them," she whispered. Retta agreed. "Someone close, maybe a former friend, maybe a neighbor, whoever it is, they're feeding you the truth one drip at a time." The next email came with an address. Room 203, Blue Pines Motel. Louisville. Be there Monday. Alone. My heart skipped. "I'm not going alone," I said. "No way," Claire added. "This smells like a trap." But Retta had another thought. Or it's someone scared. Someone who thinks you're the only one who can stop her. After a long debate, we decided I would go. Not alone, but alone enough. Claire would wait nearby. Retta would be parked in the next lot. We used burner phones and encrypted maps. If this was a trap, we were walking in with eyes wide open. Monday came. I knocked on the motel door with my heart pounding like a war drum. It opened slowly, and there she was. A young woman, barely 20, dark circles under her eyes, trembling hands. She looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. She didn't introduce herself. She just stepped aside and let me in. Then she placed a small envelope on the bed. Inside, a birth certificate and a DNA test. The room smelled of mildew and cheap cleaning spray, the kind that doesn't mask anything, it just lingers. The young woman closed the door behind me, then sat on the edge of the bed, her eyes darting around like someone expecting the worst. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. I held the envelope in my hands, still unopened. The paper felt heavier than it should have. It wasn't just evidence, it was truth. And truth, I'd learned, always came at a cost. "What's your name?" I asked gently. She hesitated. Amber Green. I used to work with Lauren, at her old clinic, before everything. Clinic? Street Mary's Women's Health, in Georgia. She wasn't a nurse, she pretended to be some kind of consultant. Mostly handled intake paperwork. She was good with lies, made every woman feel like she had their back. My stomach turned. The image of Lauren feigning compassion for struggling mothers while conning her way through the system was almost too much to bear. And the baby? Amber nodded toward the envelope. She told Daniel it was his, said she'd gotten pregnant just before your arrest, used it to keep him loyal when things got messy, but she never expected the lie to last that long. When the baby was born, she convinced Daniel to move again to protect their family, she said. And the truth? She got pregnant from a man named Rick, a bartender. They were having an affair the whole time Daniel was building her case against you. Rick left as soon as she told him about the baby, said he wasn't cut out for it. I closed my eyes. So Daniel is raising a child that's not his, based on a lie that helped put me in prison? Amber's voice cracked. Yes, but he doesn't know. He still believes her. He worships her. I opened the envelope with trembling hands. First came the birth certificate. Baby name, Ava Marie Green. Mother, Lauren Green. Father, unknown. The second page was a lab report. Paternity test. The alleged father, Daniel Lewis. Probability of paternity, 0%. My throat tightened. I'd waited 2 years for justice, but this was something else. This was the kind of truth that could burn a man to ash. Amber stood. I had copies made. I'll testify if needed. I couldn't keep quiet anymore. Why now? I asked. She looked away. Because she's planning to disappear again. New name, new town. She said once the civil suit came through, she'd settle quietly and vanish. I overheard her on the phone. She doesn't care about Daniel. Or that baby. She's just using them. I felt the weight of it all settle over me. Claire had been right. Retta had been right. This wasn't just about my name anymore. It was about a child. An innocent little girl being used as a shield by a woman who knew no limits. Amber gave me a burner number. I can't go home right now. I've got a place to stay for a while. But if you need me, I'll be there. I left the motel with my hands shaking and my heart pounding, but my mind clearer than it had been in years. I had the final piece, and I knew what I had to do. Back at Claire's, we scanned and duplicated the documents. Mr. Stokes filed an emergency injunction, adding the paternity fraud to the civil suit. He also filed a motion for a court-mandated child protection review. This changes everything, he said. Not just civil charges. Now we're looking at potential criminal fraud, endangerment of a child, and custodial interference. Claire watched me carefully. How do you feel? I didn't answer right away. Because how do you describe the feeling of watching the lie that ruined your life begin to unravel, not in court, not in public, but in a quiet, mold-scented motel room from the mouth of a frightened young woman? I felt vindicated, but I also felt tired. So very tired. That night, I didn't sleep much. I sat in the living room, staring at a photo Claire had found of Daniel as a baby, his cheeks round, his smile unguarded, his arms reaching for me like I was his entire world. What happened to that boy? The next morning, my podcast's second episode went live. I didn't name Lauren directly, but I told the story. The anonymous tip, the DNA test, the lie, the child, the betrayal. I ended the episode with a question. What would you do if your child betrayed you to protect a lie? And what would you do if that lie was raising another child who deserved better? Emails poured in again. This time, they weren't just women. Men wrote in too. Fathers cut off by their children. Sons manipulated by partners. Grandparents fighting for access to their grandchildren. The truth was uglier and wider than I'd imagined. And now it had a face. Lauren's. Claire walked in later with her phone. "You need to hear this." She played a voicemail. Daniel's voice. "Mom, I got your podcast. I saw the photo. I don't know what to believe anymore. But I need to talk." I stared at the phone for a long time. Then I picked it up. "Let's talk." It's nosing at it. I met Daniel at the old park near our church, the one where he used to run barefoot through the sprinklers, chasing his sister with a popsicle in hand. It was quiet now, the picnic tables empty, the swing set creaking slightly in the wind. I sat at our usual table, the one near the oak tree, and waited. He arrived 10 minutes late, wearing a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, his steps hesitant. He looked thinner, worn, the kind of tired that doesn't come from work or sleepless nights, but from carrying too many regrets too long. He didn't sit at first, just stood there, arms folded. "You didn't have to make it public," he said. "I didn't rise to meet the accusation. You didn't have to make it personal." He looked away. "I listened to the episode," he murmured. "And the second one. And I don't know what to say." "Try starting with 'I'm sorry,'" I said, my voice firmer than I expected. He winced. "I didn't know." "No, you chose not to know. There's a difference." He finally sat down, eyes on the grain of the weathered table. "Lauren told me what happened. She said you'd push her, threatened her. I didn't want to believe it, but..." "But what?" He exhaled, shaky. "She was all I had. After Dad died, after college, she made me feel seen. Like I mattered again." I softened. Not in forgiveness, but in understanding. "And I didn't?" "You did," he said quickly, "but you were always strong. You didn't need me." I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. "I needed you the day you testified against me." He flinched like I'd slapped him. Silence stretched between us. "I saw the DNA test," he said after a moment. "Claire emailed it to me last night. Ava's not mine." "She never was." He nodded. I confronted Lauren. She denied it at first, then tried to twist it. Said the test was fake, said you planted it, then admitted she knew it was Rick's all along. I didn't interrupt. She said, "I was a better father figure. More stable." He laughed bitterly. "Imagine that." I wanted to reach for him, but I didn't. He rubbed his face with both hands. "She's gone now." Took the car, most of the cash, left a note saying she'd free me from the guilt and to raise Ava if I wanted or not. My breath caught. "She left the baby?" He nodded slowly. "Ava's with me. I don't even know what to do. She's not mine, but she calls me Dada, and I can't just walk away." Unquote. His voice cracked. I looked at my son, my broken, manipulated, misguided son, and saw the boy I raised, hiding under layers of shame. "Daniel," I said gently, "raising her might be the first right thing you've done in years." He looked at me then, really looked. "Do you hate me?" I hesitated. "I hated what you did. I hated how quickly you threw me away. But hate you?" I shook my head. "I gave birth to you. You were the first face I loved. That doesn't disappear. It just hurts." Annette Rady. A tear slid down his cheek. "I want to make things right," he whispered. "I don't know how." "Start by testifying. Publicly. In court." "Not for me, for her," I said, nodding toward the idea of Ava. "Tell the truth, not just about the trial, about Lauren, the manipulation, everything." He nodded. "I will." We sat in silence for a long time after that. Just a mother and her son, two wounded hearts, finally beating in the same rhythm again. That evening, back at Claire's, I found Ava's photo tucked into an email Daniel had sent after we parted. She had her thumb in her mouth, her tiny eyes wide and trusting. I didn't know what her future would look like, but I knew this. She wouldn't grow up in lies. Not if I had anything to say about it. And for the first time since prison, I allowed myself to hope that maybe, just maybe, something good could still come from all this ruin. The courtroom was quiet that morning, not the silence of anticipation, but the heavy quiet of reckoning. The air was still, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Daniel sat beside our attorney at the front of the witness bench, his hands clasped tightly, a photograph of Ava tucked in the inside pocket of his jacket. His face was pale, but composed. The judge, an older woman with tired eyes and a reputation for fairness, glanced over the case file, then looked up. "Mr. Daniel Lewis," she said, "you may proceed." He stood, and for the first time in 2 years, my son spoke the truth under oath. "My name is Daniel Lewis. 2 years ago, I accused my mother, Margaret Lewis, of pushing my pregnant wife down the stairs. I believed then that she had assaulted her, that she was dangerous. I testified in court. My mother was sentenced to 2 years in prison because of my words." He paused, his jaw tightening. "I now know I was wrong. I will goads." Gasps echoed faintly from the back row. The courtroom was nearly full journalists, neighbors, community leaders, women who had written to me after hearing the podcast. They came to see the story reach its turn. "I was manipulated," Daniel continued. "My wife, Lauren Green, wasn't pregnant at the time of the fall. That was confirmed medically, but I believed her anyway. Because I loved her, because I thought she loved me." His voice cracked. "She told me my mother was jealous, controlling. She said Mom had pushed her out of rage. I didn't question it. I should have, but I didn't." Daniel reached into his jacket and held up the DNA report. "This is a paternity test. It proves that Ava, the child Lauren claimed was mine, is not biologically related to me. Lauren lied about that too, and she used that lie to keep me loyal, to keep me blind." The judge leaned forward. "Are you saying that your prior testimony was false?" "My testimony was truthful to what I believed at the time. But it was built on a lie. I now know that my mother is innocent. She didn't push Lauren. She didn't harm anyone." The courtroom was silent, hanging on every word. "I'm here to make it right," Daniel said quietly. "Not just for her. For me. For Ava. Because the truth matters, even if it comes too late." When he sat down, I saw Claire wipe a tear from her cheek beside me. I felt nothing but a quiet ache in my chest, some strange blend of sorrow, pride, and exhaustion. My son had finally stood up, but the price we'd paid for it was irreversible. The judge turned to our attorney. "Mr. Stokes, your client has filed for damages relating to wrongful imprisonment, defamation, and financial exploitation. With this testimony and the supporting evidence, we are prepared to proceed to a full hearing." Mr. Stokes nodded. "Thank you, Your Honor. We're ready." Over the next 3 hours, witness after witness testified. Amber appeared via video link, her face calm, her words clear. She detailed Lauren's lies, her fake credentials, the affair with Rick, and her manipulation of Daniel. The judge's pen didn't stop moving. Retta submitted photos, bank statements, evidence of Lauren's use of my stolen funds, lavish purchases, hidden accounts, multiple aliases. The fraud charges were stacking like dominoes. The final blow came from the county investigator assigned to Lauren's case. She'd fled the state 2 weeks ago, left Ava, emptied a hidden account, and vanished. There was now a warrant for her arrest. Daniel lowered his head when he heard that. "I knew that pain too well the moment you realized the person you gave your life to never intended to give theirs in return." After a recess, the judge returned with her decision. "In light of the new testimony and overwhelming evidence," she began, "the court recognizes that Margaret Lewis was wrongfully convicted and imprisoned. We will forward this case to the appropriate criminal review board for immediate correction and expungement." A small wave of relief swept through the room. "In addition," she continued, "given the fraud and emotional harm caused by Lauren Green, now a fugitive, the court awards Margaret Lewis financial compensation for damages totaling $1.2 million, to be paid from recovered funds." I closed my eyes. It wasn't about the money, it was about the name. My name. Clean again. Whole again. The judge turned to Daniel. "Mr. Lewis, while you were misled, your role in this cannot be ignored. I commend your courage today, but encourage you to continue that accountability beyond this courtroom." He nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. After the hearing, Claire, Daniel, and I stepped outside into the bright North Carolina sun. The courthouse steps felt steeper than I remembered. Claire squeezed my hand. "It's over." "Not yet," I said. "But we're on the other side of the storm." Daniel looked at me. "I don't expect forgiveness. I'm not offering it yet," I replied softly. but I'm willing to let you earn it." He nodded. Ava waited in a stroller nearby, asleep beneath a pink blanket. Claire bent down and smiled at her. "She's going to need a lot of love." "She'll have it," Daniel said. I walked toward the stroller, knelt beside it, and tucked the blanket a little tighter around her. "Hello, Ava," I whispered. "Let's make sure your story's different." The weeks that followed felt like waking up after a long, violent storm. The house was still standing, but everything inside had shifted. I was home again, no longer in Claire's guest room, but in my own space, yet nothing felt familiar. I stared at the walls of my living room, repainted during my absence by the tenants Daniel had rented it to. Cold gray. No warmth, no personality. The family photos were gone, the bookshelf empty. Only the faint shadow of old nail holes hinted that a life had once lived here. The first thing I did was buy paint. Soft cream for the living room, pale yellow for the kitchen, and for the small room at the end of the hall, the one Daniel once used as a study, I painted it lavender. For Ava, because she was staying with me now. "Temporarily," Daniel said, "until he could get things settled, until he could find another apartment." But I saw it in his eyes. He was scared, overwhelmed. He didn't know how to parent alone. And as much as he wanted to do the right thing, he didn't know where to begin. I'd spent 2 years being erased. Now, somehow, I'd become the anchor again. Ava adjusted quickly. At first, she was hesitant, clinging to Daniel, crying when he left. But I was patient. I sang to her, fed her mashed bananas with cinnamon like my mother used to make for Daniel. I wrapped her in knitted blankets from the attic and read her bedtime stories in a soft, low voice. One night, after I'd rocked her to sleep, I found Daniel standing in the hallway, watching me. "She smiles more when she's with you," he said quietly. "She feels safe," I replied. He nodded. "I don't know what I'm doing." "No one does at first," I said. "But you'll learn. It's no past of 9 Rizzard." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I don't deserve this." "No," I said honestly, "but she does." That was our dynamic now, honest, sometimes blunt, but moving, healing, not rushing. Claire stopped by every few days with groceries or casserole dishes or printouts of fan mail from the podcast. We were now 3 episodes in. The story had gone viral. News outlets picked it up. My name was being shared again, but this time with words like resilient, inspiring, and survivor. One letter stood out. A woman from Colorado wrote, "I lost my daughter to a toxic marriage. I blamed myself for years. Your story gave me the courage to reach out. Maybe we'll never be the same again, but I believe now that healing is possible. Thank you." I kept that one folded in my pocket. Then, one morning, Retta called. "You've got visitors," she said. "Who?" "Law enforcement. And a woman claiming to be Lauren's half-sister." My heart stilled. They arrived at my door 20 minutes later. The officer explained, "We've received a tip that Lauren Green crossed into Canada under a forged identity, but she didn't stay. She returned 3 days ago and was spotted trying to withdraw money from an old account." "And the woman?" I asked, nodding toward the figure standing awkwardly behind him. She stepped forward. Tall, thin, hair pulled into a tight bun. Her face was similar to Lauren's, but harder, sharper, the kind of face carved by disappointment and decades of silence. "My name is Elena Green," she said. "I'm her older sister, half-sister really. We haven't spoken in years." "Why are you here?" I asked, not unkindly. "Because Lauren came to me last night. She looked destroyed, said everything was unraveling. She asked me to take Ava, said she was done pretending. Then she ran." My chest tightened. "She left Ava with me," Elena continued, "but I'd heard enough to know she didn't belong to me. She doesn't belong to Lauren anymore either. I want to do what's right." "Where is she now?" Retta asked. "I don't know." "She left on foot. Took nothing but her bag." The officer handed me a card. "We'll find her, but in the meantime, we may need you to come in help confirm any statements." I agreed. Daniel was quiet when I told him. He just picked Ava up, kissed her forehead, and said, "She's not coming back this time." "I don't think she is," I replied. But part of me couldn't shake the feeling that Lauren was watching, waiting, that somewhere, behind another curtain or under another name, she was planning her next escape. And yet there was peace. Because for now, Ava was safe. Daniel was trying, and I was home. Not just in my house, but in my truth. That evening, I recorded episode 4 of the podcast. I called it The Exit Wound. It's not always the blow that breaks you, I said into the mic. Sometimes it's the silence after, the moment when the pain settles in and you realize you're still standing, that the wound didn't kill you, that you get to decide what comes next. I ended the episode with Ava's laughter in the background, the truest sound of survival I'd ever heard. A week passed with no sign of Lauren. No bank activity, no passport trail, no sightings on traffic cameras or border crossings. It was as if she had vanished off the face of the earth. And maybe, I thought, she wanted it that way. For the first time in 2 years, I wasn't waking up in fear. But I also wasn't sleeping in peace. Because even if Lauren was gone, the damage she left behind still lingered in Ava's uncertain future, in Daniel's haunted eyes, and in the quiet moments where I questioned everything I'd missed. The lies I hadn't seen. The trust I gave too freely. One morning, while Ava napped, Daniel and I sat across from each other at my kitchen table. Between us was a manila folder. "I want you to have this," he said. Inside were legal documents. He was filing for full custody of Ava, but naming me as her legal guardian in case of emergency. More than that, he was adding me as her secondary medical contact, school contact, and co-signer for every major decision. "I don't know what kind of father I'll be," he said, "but I know she needs you, and I need you. I'm not pretending I deserve your trust again, but I'm asking for your partnership." I placed my hand over his. "I won't leave her," I said. "Or you. Not again." End quote. That night, I lay in bed replaying every chapter that had led me here, and I decided something. It was time to tell the whole story. Not just in pieces, not filtered through courtroom transcripts or whispered podcast confessions, but fully. So I started writing a memoir. I called it The Lie That Raised Her. Chapter by chapter, I poured my soul onto the page, the marriage that frayed over time, the son I raised with trembling hope, the young woman who manipulated her way into our lives, the trial, the betrayal, the cold silence of prison, and the slow, painful unraveling of truth. Writing was harder than I expected. Some nights I cried into the keys. Other nights, I raged. But slowly, I turned pain into paragraphs. Claire connected me with a literary agent. After reading the first 5 chapters, she said, "This isn't just a memoir, it's a reckoning." A few days later, we got a call from a major publishing house. They wanted to make an offer. It wasn't about the money. It was about the message. Your story matters. The world needs to hear it. Daniel was hesitant when I told him. "Are you sure?" he asked. "That much exposure again?" "I lived through worse," I said. "And this time, I get to control the narrative." 2 days later, I got a call from a voice I never expected to hear again. It was Rick, Ava's biological father. "I saw the story," he said. "I didn't know about any of it. She told me she lost the baby." "She lied to you," I replied. He was silent for a long time. "I want to do the right thing. I want to meet her." Daniel and I debated for days. In the end, we agreed. Ava deserved the truth, but not all at once. We arranged a meeting at a neutral park. Rick brought a small stuffed bear and stood 20 feet away as Daniel held Ava. She looked at the man, curious but calm. No tears, no fear, just eyes wide open. Later, Daniel turned to me and said, "Maybe she'll never know all the lies we were caught in, but she'll know what love looks like." And that, I realized, was what we were all building toward. Not a perfect ending, but an honest one. That week, I recorded episode 5 of the podcast. I named it The Space Between Lies. "It's in the silence after betrayal," I said into the mic, "in the pause between endings and beginnings, that we decide who we really are. Do we stay broken, or do we gather what remains and begin again?" In the background, Ava babbled from her playpen, and I smiled, because we were beginning again. Fall arrived with its crisp breath and golden leaves, painting our small North Carolina town in shades of memory. Every breeze carried a whisper of change, of letting go, of turning pages. Ava had begun to crawl. Not just the wobbly scoot of a baby, but a determined, unstoppable crawl. She'd pull herself up by the coffee table and laugh, deep belly laughs that echoed through the house and filled the cracks Lauren had left behind. Daniel was different too. He smiled more, slept better. He started a part-time job at a local carpentry shop, a quiet trade with steady hands and honest work. On weekends, he built wooden toys for Ava, a rocking horse, a small bookshelf shaped like a tree. Watching him glue and sand, I saw a version of him I hadn't seen since he was a teenager. A builder, a creator, a caretaker. One Sunday afternoon, while Daniel was out shopping for Ava's first Halloween costume, I received a call from a blocked number. I hesitated before answering. "Margaret," the voice said, soft and unfamiliar. "It's Lauren." My heart didn't pound. It froze. She sounded tired. Different. Like something inside her had burned out. "I know you hate me," she continued. "You have every right to. I needed to say something." "Why now?" I asked coldly. "Because I'm done running." There was a pause. "I've been living in a shelter under a different name, watching you on the news, the podcast, the book. I didn't think you'd survive, but you did." She exhaled, slow and cracked. "I didn't call to ask for anything. I just wanted you to know. Ava was the only real thing in my life, but I broke that too." "She's safe," I said, "and she's loved." "I know," she whispered. "Daniel, he deserved better. So did you. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Just, maybe one day, when she's older, tell her I loved her in my own broken way." Silence stretched. "I'll never speak of you to her," I said, calm and firm. "But if she ever asks, I'll tell her the truth, the whole truth, and I won't lie to make you sound better. I wouldn't want you to." And just like that, the call ended. No apology, no plea, just a final page from a closed chapter. I didn't tell Daniel right away. I needed to carry it for a while first, to process what it meant, to let the words settle into the soil of our new life before letting them bloom. Later that week, I stood in front of a small audience at a local bookstore. My memoir had been released. People lined up to shake my hand, to thank me, to cry in my arms. One woman whispered, "Your story saved my sister." I looked at the stack of books beside me, The Lie That Raised Her, and realized the story wasn't mine alone anymore. It belonged to every woman who had been erased, betrayed, and quietly rebuilt herself in the dark. Daniel came to the signing. He stood in the back, holding Ava, rocking her gently as she stared at the lights above. And then, for the first time since my release, I said the words I never thought I could. "I forgive you," I whispered to him that night as we tucked Ava into her crib. He turned, eyes glassy. "You do?" "I have to," I said. "Because if I don't, then Lauren still wins. And I'm done letting her have anything." We stood there, side by side, watching the rise and fall of Ava's chest. There was still work to do, legal matters, therapy, memories that stung like fresh bruises, but we were no longer bleeding. We were healing. That night, I recorded episode 6. Its title, The Weight of Forgiveness. Forgiveness, I spoke into the mic, isn't for them. It's for us. It's how we take the shards and shape them into something human, something whole. It doesn't mean we forget. It doesn't mean they didn't break us, but it means they don't get to keep us broken. Outside, the wind rustled the trees. Inside, Ava sighed in her sleep, and I finally breathed. Thanksgiving crept in quietly that year. No fanfare, no extended family, just us, me, Daniel, and little Ava, who had discovered a new favorite game, dropping mashed sweet potato on the floor and giggling like she'd invented gravity. It was the first holiday we'd shared together in 3 years. Daniel offered to cook, but after watching him nearly set the oven mitts on fire, we compromised he'd be in charge of peeling and chopping, and I'd handle everything else. As we worked side by side in the kitchen, music humming low in the background, I noticed how normal it all felt. Not perfect, not cinematic, just present. Present was a gift I'd learned not to take for granted. When the meal was ready, we sat around the small wooden table, no decorations, no centerpiece, just 3 mismatched plates and a candle Ava kept trying to grab. I took a deep breath and offered a quiet grace, for the truth that came late, for the child who reminds us to begin again, and for the love that survived the fire. Daniel whispered, "Amen," and reached across the table for my hand. After dinner, while Ava slept in her playpen, Daniel handed me an envelope. Inside was a photo. Me, holding Daniel at age 5, both of us covered in chocolate cake and laughing with our mouths wide open. "I found it in one of Dad's old boxes," he said. "I thought you should have it." Tears stung my eyes. "That day," he continued, "was the first time I rode a bike without training wheels. I fell 3 times. You made me keep getting up." I nodded, smiling through the ache. "You always knew how to love me," he said, "even when I didn't make it easy." "It was not meant. That's what mothers do," I whispered. Later that week, we got a call from Claire. "I've been contacted by a documentary producer," she said, voice buzzing with excitement. "They want to adapt your podcast into a limited series, film interviews, reenactments, the works." I was stunned. "You think people would want to watch this?" "Are you kidding? Margaret, they need to. The justice system, the blind spots, the family dynamic. It's not just your story anymore, it's a mirror." End quote. I agreed to a meeting. The producer was a woman in her 50s, sharp, empathetic, no nonsense. She sat across from me with a notepad and said, "I don't want to dramatize your pain. I want to illuminate it. You lived what most people can't even imagine. Let's make them understand." I gave her permission to begin pre-production. Filming would start early spring. Meanwhile, the podcast continued. Episode 7. The Ties That Mend. I told the story of our Thanksgiving, of Ava's giggles, of the chocolate cake photo, of the quiet rituals of rebuilding, not in grand gestures, but in folding laundry together, in grocery store runs, in bedtime songs. "I used to think healing would come in a courtroom," I said, "but it came in smaller ways, in the trust of a child, in the hand of a son who once turned away." Emails poured in again. One man wrote, "My mother and I haven't spoken in 10 years. Your words gave me the courage to call her. Thank you." And so, we continued. Each day, not perfect, but better. One night, Daniel asked if I'd consider being Ava's godmother officially. "You already are," he said, "but I want it in writing, in her heart." I agreed. We planned a small baptism at the church where Daniel was christened as a baby. Reverend Owens, now retired but still full of wisdom, agreed to perform the ceremony. "It's time for grace," he said. "For all of you, it's panned." As I stood there, holding Ava in my arms, the light from the stained glass windows warming our faces, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not just survival, but peace. Winter settled over our town like a hush. The days grew shorter, the nights longer, and every breath seemed to linger in the cold morning air like a quiet reminder of how far we'd come. I'd never liked winter too still, too sharp, but that year, it felt softer, more reflective. Like the earth itself had paused to honor the changes in our lives. Filming for the documentary began in early January. The crew arrived with lights and questions, boom mics and quiet reverence. They treated our story with care, not as a spectacle, but as testimony. Each room of my house became a set, my kitchen table transformed into a confessional. I was nervous at first. I'd spent so long surviving in silence that speaking into cameras felt like exposure all over again. But then I saw Ava toddling across the living room, clutching her stuffed bear, and I reminded myself, this isn't just about me anymore. It's about breaking the cycle. My first interview was long. The producer, Elena, asked hard questions. "What was the first moment you realized something wasn't right with Lauren? Why do you think Daniel believed her so easily? What kept you going in prison?" I didn't sugarcoat my answers. I believed love was enough, I told her. That if I raised my son right, protected him, gave him everything I had, he'd see me. But Lauren knew how to play him. She knew his grief, she knew his guilt, and she knew my pride. "And prison?" she asked softly. "It broke me," I said. "But then, it rebuilt me." Daniel was interviewed next. He sat in the same chair I had, fingers clenched, then unclenched. He didn't dodge responsibility. "I wasn't just manipulated, I was weak," he said. "I wanted to be loved so badly that I let someone weaponize that need. I'll regret it for the rest of my life." They interviewed Claire, Retta, even Reverend Owens. Every voice added a layer. And together, we built something honest. Not polished, not perfect, but true. Halfway through filming, we received news from the district attorney's office. Lauren had been located in Oregon. She was living under a false identity, working in a bar, and had been arrested during a routine traffic stop. Daniel was the one who told me. "I don't feel anything," he said. "Is that wrong?" "No," I replied. "It's survival." The DA asked if I wanted to testify again for the fraud charges, the financial crimes, the perjury. I said yes. Not because I needed revenge, but because justice doesn't work on silence. The trial date was set for early spring. In the meantime, the documentary team followed us gently through our daily life. Grocery store runs, church on Sundays, me reading to Ava while Daniel made dinner. One evening, Elena pulled me aside. "There's something powerful about the way you speak," she said. "It's not just your words, it's how you hold pain without letting it drown you." I smiled faintly. "That's age, and grief, and stubbornness." She laughed. "We're calling the series Unbroken." I nodded slowly. "That's what we are." Then came Ava's first birthday. We didn't throw a party, just a small gathering. Claire baked a vanilla cake with strawberries. Daniel strung up paper decorations. I knitted her a tiny lavender sweater. As she smashed her cake with joyful abandon, frosting in her curls, I felt something shift in me. Not a release, but a quiet blooming. Of hope, of future, of life beyond the past. That night, I recorded episode 8. Its title, 1 Year of Ava. "We named her truthfully," I said. "Ava means life." And that's what she gave us. New life, in the ruins, in the shame, in the silence. She reminded us how to breathe again. At the end of the episode, I whispered a promise. "Little girl, you were born from a lie, but you will live in truth. You will grow with love, and we, your broken, healing, stubborn family, will carry you forward." The courthouse looked different the second time. Not because the walls had changed, but because I had. 2 years ago, I entered those halls in shackles, branded by accusations and shame. This time, I walked in on my own terms, dressed in navy wool, head high, truth as my armor. Daniel walked beside me, carrying Ava in his arms. Claire, Retta, and even Reverend Owens joined us in the gallery. Lauren was already seated at the defense table. She looked older, hollowed out. Her hair, once styled to perfection, was limp and pulled back. Her eyes darted up only once toward Ava, and then back down, as if she couldn't bear the weight of what she'd lost. She didn't speak during the trial. Her lawyer entered a plea deal. Guilty on multiple counts of fraud, perjury, and identity theft. She would serve time, though far less than what I had. I didn't protest the terms. It wasn't about balancing punishment. It was about ending the cycle. When I took the stand, the courtroom was silent. "I lost everything because of a lie," I began. "My name, my freedom, my son. I was told to stay quiet, to be the bigger person. But silence doesn't heal. Only truth does." I turned slightly, my gaze falling on Lauren not out of malice, but clarity. "You didn't just steal my years. You stole my trust. But you didn't destroy me. You reforged me." I ended with a whisper. "I choose to speak, for every woman who was told not to." The judge nodded slowly, and the courtroom exhaled. Lauren was sentenced to 6 years, with eligibility for parole in 4. She was escorted out without resistance, her steps slow, eyes never lifting. Outside, the air smelled like rain. I stood on the courthouse steps with Daniel beside me, Ava asleep in his arms, her small hand gripping the collar of his coat. "Well," Daniel said, "that's that." "No," I replied. "That's this, and this is ours now." We rode home in quiet. The following week, the final episode of the podcast aired. Episode 9, The Last Word. "I've told you everything," I said into the mic. "The betrayal, the bars, the breaking. But here's what I need you to remember. Not the courtroom, not the lies. Remember the rising." I paused. Because in the end, it wasn't justice that saved me. It was love. Worn, imperfect, scarred, but persistent. That night, after Ava went to sleep, Daniel and I stood in the kitchen. He held 2 mugs of cocoa and looked at me like the boy he once was. "I'm proud of you, Mom," he said. I smiled. "I'm proud of us." End quote. We toasted without clinking the mugs, just a quiet nod between mother and son. The documentary aired a month later. It broke viewership records. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of letters, emails, videos of families sitting together, watching and crying, learning what silence costs and what truth can reclaim. Ava grew. She learned new words, laughed like her father once did, danced in the living room to old Motown songs I hadn't heard since the 70s. Spring arrived, warmth returned, and with it came the final chapter of our rebuilding. Daniel bought a house down the street, nothing big, just a 2-bedroom with a yard, but every window gleamed with possibility. "I want Ava to grow up close to you," he said. "She should know what strength looks like." I helped paint her room again, this time sky blue with white clouds. Ava chose it. "It's like the sky is in here," she said with wonder. Yes, I thought. The sky is finally in here. On Ava's 2nd birthday, we had more guests, more cake, more laughter. She blew out 2 candles with a wild cheer, and I realized this wasn't the end of our story. It was the beginning of hers. The scars are still there. They always will be. But they don't define me anymore. Because I am not what was done to me. I am what I did with it. And as I watched Ava spin in circles beneath the sunlight filtering through the trees, I knew this is what survival looks like. Not silence, but song. This story reminds us that justice is not always found in the courtroom, but in the quiet choices we make to stand back up after being broken. It's about the resilience of a mother's love, the painful journey of forgiveness, and the healing power of truth. Even when the people closest to us betray us, we can still choose dignity, rebuild from the ruins, and become stronger not despite our scars but because of them.